Hello and welcome to Create Your Own Community, celebrating a rule that works for you. I'm Jonathan Taylor. I am director of the Arkansas Governor's Council on Developmental Disability, and I will be your host today. I am a 51-year-old white male with mostly gray hair, some facial hair, glasses, and a black suit. And my background is completely blurred because I'm too embarrassed for you to see what my desk looks like. That being said, welcome to today's webinar. This self-advocacy workshop is part 2 in our series, Creating Community, where we'll focus on the HCBS rule that empowers advocates to make their own decisions in their own community. This webinar is co-sponsored by the Autism Society of America and the National Association of Councils on Developmental Disabilities. On March 17th of this year, the home and community-based settings final rule went into effect. Today, we'll talk about how the HCBS rules can be made real in your own lives. To get us started, I'm very excited to introduce our first speaker, Kate Brady. Kate is a project manager for the National Center on Advancing Person-Centered Practices and Systems in the HCBS setting rule engagement, and is particularly excited to advance community response to critical public systems changes that align with the Human Service Research Institute goal to see all people living healthy, fulfilling lives as powerful, respected members of society. Kate has worked in the field of disability policy, service, and systems advocacy for nearly 2 decades. She brings experiences from work across multiple systems, including home and community-based services, vocational rehab, Medicaid, Social Security, and workforce development. Kate thrives leading organizational, team, and individual change through the development and implementation of elaborate research and technical assistance endeavors, is adept at problem identification, process improvement, and program design, implementation, and evaluation. Prior to coming to HSRI, Kate worked as Deputy Director at the Georgia Council on Disability and is consulted for the University Centers of Excellence at both the University of Georgia and the University of Massachusetts, and worked as Director of Research at the National Organization on Disability. Kate has a lifelong love of the arts, in particular folk music and independent theater and film. When she's not at work, she enjoys time with her wife, 2 teenagers, and a gaggle of pets. Community connectedness is precious too, and she treasures knowing and spending time with neighbors and friends. Kate, welcome.
Thank you so much, Jonathan, and apologies, y'all, for the comically long bio. It is my pleasure to join you, and many thanks to NACDD and the Autism Society for hosting and for inviting us. Hopefully now you can see my slides, and I should say that I am a white woman. I'm wearing a funny little brown hat and glasses today, and I have behind me a HSRI background with some blue and green dots. I'm going to hide the captions because I can't advance my slides. There we go. So I'm coming to you from the Human Services Research Institute, where we are running the National Center on Advancing Person-Centered Practices and Systems, and have been collaborating with NACDD on engagement with the HCBS rule. And as you heard from Jonathan, the transition period has ended. And so that means we can expect and push for full compliance, meaning the way that services are delivered, the places that services happen, how you receive your supports from whom, all of those things should align with the HCBS rule. But today, we're going to focus specifically on the requirements for your person-centered plan. And what's neat about this is that although March 17th marks the conclusion of the transition period for provider services, the requirement for your person-centered plan has been in effect for quite a long time. And so systems and service systems have had a lot of opportunity to build this into their structure. So we'll look quickly at what is NCAPS. We'll talk a little bit about how the HCBS Home and Community-Based Services final rule affects the person-centered plan, diving specifically into the impacts on where you live and work and how it provides choices for that. And also we really want to think about a person-centered plan as more than a service plan, right? It's not just a list of what you're going to get, but it should represent who you are, what your goals are, and then secondarily, how you'll be supported in the coming year. And then we'll look a little bit about some methods that you have available for negotiating the planning process with your providers to be sure that you're living the life that you want. So just a quick overview of the NCAP Center. It's a federally funded technical assistance center funded by ACL and CMS with the goal of promoting systems change that makes person-centered principles not just an aspiration, but a reality in the lives of all people across the lifespan. So we are focused on participant and family engagement, cultural and linguistic humility, and cross-system collaboration. Here's a little quote from the ever famous and impactful Justin Dart. Civil rights are not a guarantee of the good life, but an equal opportunity and responsibility to participate in producing the good life for oneself and for all. Government alone cannot implement the ADA. This is a responsibility of all Americans. And so we are here to think about how we push forwards on this. So before we talk about a plan, it's important to understand the context of person-centered planning really has to happen in a person-centered system. And if we're only thinking about a systems focus, then we use a kind of orientation to look at the way that limitations define the person. We might think that services are just things people become eligible for. We might overemphasize problems, and we might derive what services are available based on the needs of the system rather than the person. If we take a person-centered systems approach, then we're really looking at the unique capabilities of every person. We're looking at strengths and preferences, and recognizing the complexities of disability as we're planning for the future of someone's life. So we really want to have that orientation. We know these approaches are important because they support the person to actively control their life, to retain autonomy. We know it's important to meet people where they are so that we can accommodate changing needs over time, and that happens for all of us. So no person-centered plan should be a static document, even within the context of that 1 year, right? And you always have the right to be adjusting it as needed. We know that being person-centered can reduce feelings of isolation, and that relationships are so important, and that there's actually an impact on health outcomes, right? So it's not just a value that we have, but it matters functionally for how healthy people are. Quick clarification, person-centered thinking are those principles and ideas, right? It's the values and the language. The idea that the person and their loved ones are experts in their own life, that we should equally value quality of life, well-being, and being able to have choices. Planning is these methods, right? That's what we're going to dive in today, that allow us to get at someone's preferences and interests, and how we're going to achieve that, right? What are the paid and unpaid supports that we'll bring to bear to support someone? This process should always be directed by the person for whom the plan is being written, and it should be supported by people they choose. And then there are person-centered practices. That's the alignment of services and systems to ensure that the person has full access to the benefits of community living. And it should involve service delivery that really holds up the person's movement towards their own personal goals. Oh, look at that. There's some animation. Somebody made this fancy. So we imagine people will know what to expect from their planning process, service and supports. That we know that it's really important that facilitators are well qualified and supported, and that systems deliver services that are consistent with person-centered values, and equally critical that people with lived experience are driving at all levels of the system, and that we have quality measures, right? So we're examining how well are things going. Is person-centered planning being implemented like we intended? Are people getting from the supports that they have the kinds of outcomes that they wanted? And that continuous learning is applied throughout the system. All right, so diving into home and community-based services, just the level set that we're all thinking about the same thing. We're thinking about services that help people with disabilities and older adults live in their communities. As a matter of reference, in 2018, more than 4.7 million people received Medicaid-funded home and community-based services. These are supports that help with employment, transportation, home care, home health, maybe activities of daily living, finances, and assisted tech. And it was in 2014 that the final settings rule required that everyone in services have a person-centered plan. So there are some specifics laid out regarding what that plan should look like, and also about what the process of the plan should be. And so we'll dive into that in just a sec. But when we think about the plan itself, the plan should reflect the setting where you want to live and where you want to receive services, and that the person for whom the services are happening got to make choices there. It should be reflective of strengths and preferences, right? So not just deficits or impacts of disability. Should show that any clinical support needs were determined through a functional assessment. It should also identify who's going to monitor the plan, who's going to pay attention to whether it's working. It should reflect those paid and unpaid supports, and that the provider was identified by the person and is aware of what services they'll be providing, and that the person gets power in choosing those services. The plan should include specifics around the goals and desired outcomes. It should include any risk factors, and we'll talk about risks because there are some really important protections for people receiving services so that your right to risk cannot be constrained. And that's a really important protection that this rule provides. The regulation also states that that the plan should reflect any services that you might want to self-direct, that it should be written in plain language, understandable, agreed to by the person, and that it should prevent any unnecessary or inappropriate services. So that's a protection for the system. When we think about the process, what are your rights regarding the person-centered planning process itself? Well, you have the right to lead the planning process. And that means that you can lead it with any kind of support for leading that process that you might want. That could be preparatory support, so thinking ahead of time about who you want to have there, where you want it to happen, when you want it to happen. But it's yours to lead and make decisions about. It's not something that should happen because somebody calls up and says, hey, I'm your support coordinator. I need you to be at your planning process next Monday at 3 p.m. Right? It should include whomever you like. It should allow you to resolve conflicts and have difficult conversations with the people in your life about how you might want things to go. And it should be free of conflicts of interest, right? Meaning there shouldn't be a provider or someone pushing you to make choices that you don't want to make. And there should be a way for you to update it regularly. And you have the right to get all of the information that you want in order to make the choices that you want to make, in order to really evaluate your options. And you should have real options. So that's another really big point, right? So if you're finding that you're only being presented with one place that you can live, that is not appropriate, right? You should have real choices, and you should have time to consider them carefully. As I said, it should happen where you want. It should reflect your culture, and we'll talk a little bit about culture in a minute. And that you've had the opportunity to consider non-disability specific settings where both people with and without disabilities go. All right, so here's the restrictions part, right? So we know that sometimes when things that are scary happen in somebody's life, or something goes wrong, and people don't understand the consequences, or it feels dangerous, then restrictions will be put in place, right? Examples of this are maybe someone has been to their doctor and they've said, hey, you need to lose weight. And it might be that the group home says, well, we're going to eliminate snack food to help you lose weight. But you have choices around how those restrictions happen. And they have to be the least invasive possible. And they have to document that you've tried all kinds of non-restrictive ways to accomplish the goal, right? So if it feels possible, you might just ask a friend to help you choose what you're going to eat for lunch, right? Rather than having what's in the house limited. So all those less intrusive methods should be documented, and there should be a very clear description of any restriction that's happening. It should be proportionate, right? And there should be ongoing monitoring so that we're always moving back towards having fewer restrictions. And you have to be able to consent to the restriction. All right, so I'm really excited to share with you about this culture and person-centered practices series, because there are some really great videos here that are just spot on for what we're talking about today. And you can see here, it's a massive series of little short videos that we did with folks with disabilities of a variety of kinds, with lots of different experiences with person-centered planning and lots of different identities. And people have shared about their experiences on our website here. We'll make sure you get these links. There's a series of YouTube videos. There's also a companion guide if you want to be able to use this content to talk through with others and do some shared learning. And the companion guide includes some helpful definitions about what we mean by culture and cultural humility. I'm not going to spend a ton of time on that today because we have so many great folks for you to hear from. But I did want to share with you Andy's video. And Andy is a person who's worked as a systems change advocate in LA for several years. He's a member of many boards. His expertise extends to federal government and corporate levels. And he's looking to marry his policy work with the entertainment industry work that he's doing. So I'm going to stop sharing this so that I can share this. So if you excuse me, for just 1 second, I'm going to share this video. Please, some fellow panelists, when I share, if you can't hear it, somebody.
Hi, my name is Andy Arias. I'm a disability rights advocate and a policy expert. I'm based out of Los Angeles. And what person-centered planning means to me specifically in the way thinking and implementation happens is bringing the person with a disability to the forefront of their planning. I myself have multiple identities. I'm LGBTQ, Latinx, and somebody with a significant disability. But person-centered planning to me is incorporating me in all of that planning, right? Or the individual from the start to the end before plans get implemented or pushed forward. The person with the disability needs to be involved in every aspect. They need to be asked instead of told. They need to be given options to move forward. Taking into the consideration someone's culture is also very important. I'm Latinx, and when I was growing up in the foster care system, I was very rarely looped into any kind of planning for myself until I demanded to be engaged. So this can't happen. We need to look at someone's background and culture. The way someone grows up is a huge factor in how they look at their disability and how they look at their abilities and how they can move forward. But it's a daily practice. You can't just have a webinar and say, this is what we're doing. You can't just have a discussion with one family and say we're moving the needle. What you have to do is make sure that your material, your information is digestible by that culture or by that family. Many cultures are faith-driven and are predominantly looked at through a faith lens and through their lens of culture, and whether that be Hispanic, Latinx, Asian, African American. So you've got to consider and ask the question, where can we change that framework, right? Do I have somebody on staff that can help me have those conversations about culture and faith and where those two things intersect? Now, the question comes, are there ways that we can facilitate, support, and celebrate someone's culture and experience? And the answer is yes, but the answer here is ask, right? Ask what you're doing. If you're not from the African American community, if you're not from the Hispanic community, if you're not from a specific community or LGBTQIA community, and you just have some sort of celebration expecting you're doing everything right, that's almost as bad as not doing anything at all. If you're going to open the door and have these moments of conversation and experience and honor, really engage the individual first from the get-go, and say, like, is this okay? Can we have an LGBTQ African American Latinx intersectionality day? And what would that look like for you? How would you like to be celebrated, if at all? Right? That might be a key factor, right? You might want to do an inclusive experience, but an individual might say, like, I don't feel like being marginalized. And so you got to take it on a group basis, or a key component is a person by person basis. And
All right. There's more from Andy that we can hear another time. But I love his points about not just making it a webinar comical and that we're doing a webinar, right? But the real work is in the work that we do afterwards. So let me screen share and we'll talk a little bit about in our last 5 minutes here, what you can reasonably expect from the people that are supporting the planning process. All right, so I want to talk a bit about the 5 competency domains for person-centered planning. There's also a plain language version of this, which is the 5 skill areas for person-centered planning. And this is early work that the NCAP Center did in collaboration with Janice Chandora and then a number of HSRI employees, including Bevan Croft, Yoshi Cardell, Teresita Gonsalves, and Miso Park. And the reason I think this is worth discussing today is that we know that planning is something that you do with a person and that it requires really depthful skills from the facilitators. And these facilitators end up being anybody, right? Because we're not just talking about a service plan. We're talking about a plan for your life. And we know that planning is different depending on what's going on. So if you're just having a kind of regular time, you might just be planning around how to keep life going as it is, right? If something big is happening in your life, like you're leaving school and going to your first job, or you need to change where you're living because something has changed with your family, that's big transitional life support and support planning. And that's a different kind of process. So you might need different skill sets for folks to support this. And we also, we plan informally, right, with people in our lives. And then we also do big formal planning processes that are inclusive of our service plans. So we're going to refer to the skills and abilities that people helping with planning need as competencies. And when we did this research, we found that there are 5 basic competencies that people need. So they need to be able to be strengths-based and culturally informed and whole person focused. They need to be able to cultivate connections, both inside the system and outside the system. They need to be focused on rights, choice, and control, and informed about people's rights. They need to be oriented towards partnership and teamwork and have really developed facilitation skills. And then no surprise, but it's also important that they be able to document, implement, and monitor the plan. So in thinking about the home and community-based services role, if we look at this first domain, we're really noticing that the rule tells us the planning process has to be reflective of cultural considerations and that it needs to be provided in plain language. And so that aligns with the culturally informed whole person focus. In the second demand, we see that the rule requires, our domain, excuse me, we see that the rule requires that the planning process should offer informed choices, right? And that we should be connecting with both paid and unpaid supports. I'm gonna hurry up a little. Let's go back one. When we look at the partnership, teamwork, communication, and facilitation domain, we see that the rule requires that the plan should happen at times that the person chooses, and Andy mentioned that, right? It's about asking, not telling. It should be easily accessible and distributed, right? And in this domain, we're expecting that the meetings are held in a professional way and that everyone everyone pertinent is involved, what the person chooses. And last but not least, in this domain E, documentation, implementation, and quality, the rule requires that the person for whom the plan is done gets to identify who they want to monitor the plan. They get to expect that they have a copy of the plan, that they can update it when they want. So last but not least, I just wanted to offer quick thoughts, and hopefully in the discussion we'll be able to dive more into this. But I think some ways that you can be sure that the HCBS rule enables you to really shape your person-centered plan in such a way that you get the life that you want and the supports that you want. I think a part of that puzzle is knowing your rights. Another part of that puzzle is making sure that that plan really does reflect who you are and what you want, and that you've gotten some opportunity to think about how you want to be supported and by whom, and that you take every opportunity, as we all would, to revise your plan as you need to make changes, because life is not linear. It belongs to you, not to the system. Here are some resources. I won't dive in, but I'm sure that NACBD and the Autism Society will make the PowerPoints available. If you want to get involved, you're welcome to follow NCAPS. We'd love to have you there. And now I am going to stop sharing and turn it over to Bob Johnston.
Thank you, Kate. My name is Bob Johnston. Thank you, Kate. A little bit of background about myself. I'm a 68-year-old man with a gray goatee. How's that? I got involved in advocacy back in 1975. I was standing in between two parallel parked cars waiting for the traffic to clear when a driver ran into the first of those parked cars, pushing them together, and I was caught in between. Over the course of the following 40 years now, I've had my legs rebuilt, had 22 surgeries to rebuild my legs so that I could get back to leading an active lifestyle. But more importantly, 30 years after my accident, my son was diagnosed with autism. And that's what really prompted me to get more involved with the autism community, because I understand disability now as both a parent and a patient. Getting involved in the Autism Society eventually led me to the Autism Society of Greater Wisconsin, which I am a past president of, not a current president. I left that position a number of years ago, and am on the Wisconsin Governor's Council for Autism, and then recently joined the board for the Autism Society of America, I guess about a year ago, and am co-chair of the Public Policy Committee. But I found that it's really kind of fun as a parent to be involved in these kinds of activities. So I appreciate your letting me join you today. It's my pleasure to be able to introduce you today to Julie Strenn, who is with the Opportunity Development Centers. Julie joined ODC in December of 2019 and is currently the president. ODC is a large nonprofit, $12 million organization that provides services to over 1,000 individuals each year. Julie has more than 28 years of experience in long-term care, having worked for provider agencies, managed care organizations, and state and local government agencies, including the Wisconsin Department of Health Services, INCLUSA, which was formerly called the Community Care of Central Wisconsin, and Wood County. Julie also owns a consulting business through which she worked with various service providers and funders and multiple state governments in transforming the long-term care system to focus on community employment and community living for people with disabilities. Julie, thank you very much for taking the time to join us today. If you could take over the platform, you're all set to go. Thank you.
Thanks, Bob. Thanks so much. What a privilege to join you today. I'm Julie Strenn. I'm a 48-year-old white woman who has sandy blonde hair. As Bob shared, I have worked in the long-term care system my entire career and have been privileged in the last 3 years to join an organization that I worked very closely with during my consulting days in providing some support as they transitioned into a person-centered organization. And what I will share is that the biggest change that happened culturally within our organization. So, our message today is really to service providers who would be on the call about how your organization can change, and to individuals, self-advocates that are on the call. How can you help really move forward the services and supports that you might be receiving to really be provided in a person-centered way? As an organization, we really changed from a focus of providing services to a focus to how to help every single individual live their best life. And so that would be what I would fundamentally say has changed as an organization. Joining me today, and when they present, I'll have them introduce themselves, is Carla Zarni. She is our manager of our pre-vocational and community services, and Odessa Reinwand, who has really taken on an amazing advocacy role within our organization as we have been shifting who we are as an organization. So on the next slide, this is who we are, right? So our mission and our vision and our values. And we really took a close look at who we were as an organization. And our mission was to empower people with disability to achieve their work and life goals. And we envisioned communities strengthened and enriched by the abilities of every person who contributes to those communities. So we actually changed our tagline, we connect people and communities. So it was a conscious fundamental shift. Instead of concentrating on what will our services look like, we wanted to concentrate on what is each and every person's individual goals for their life and their plan, and then develop how to create those experiences for them in their life for them to be able to really shape what that looks like. So a true fundamental shift in what that looks like. The next slide. So, as we talked today, and they're going to be sharing the Autism Society and NACDD sharing their person-centered planning checklist. I looked over that checklist as we were prepping for presenting for you today. And what I would say about the home and community-based setting rules, or the HCBS, as Kate was sharing, is it gave us an amazing opportunity that the federal government actually aligned in regards to it is about a great life. So we do not see in our organization that HCBS rules is compliance. We actually see it as this amazing framework to help each individual decide what a great life looks like. Next slide. So just a little bit about our organization and our transformation, because I think it helps you understand the breadth and the scope of who we were as an organization and how we really took this focus to change. So this is the state of Wisconsin. And as you can see, we're in 13 counties in Wisconsin. You can see that we started in 1965, just in that one little county in the middle called Wood. And we've expanded to 13 different counties across the state of Wisconsin since 2012. The next slide. This just gives you a breadth of the individuals that we support within our organization. So again, looking back to 2009 to 2022, you can see that in 2022, we crossed that line of supporting over 1,000 individuals. So 1,048 individuals in the supports that they might need in their life. And again, really this amazing opportunity to think about not how to design services like, here's a service we're offering, who wants to come? But instead, really meeting with that individual and thinking about what do you want your life to look like? And then what can we design and develop around that? Next slide. So I wanted to share this slide because especially from an employment perspective, we used to be the traditional sheltered workshop. That's what our organization started in 1965. We were the place that everyone came to work in Wood County. And as you can see in some of the numbers, that blue line is who's employed by ODC. And you can see in 2012, we employed 331 people paid at sub-minimum wage piece rate within our buildings. That's who we were, that's what we did. And in 2022, we employed 16 individuals, and those jobs were no longer piece rate jobs that we were the employer in more of a sheltered workshop facility based, but instead they were jobs like a self advocate working for our organization, or individuals that were working for a retail shop that is out in the community. So it was really transitioning those jobs to no longer paying piece rate. And if anyone was working for us, they were working in jobs that all of us were working at, completely integrated into the community. You can also see at the same time, we went from supporting a couple hundred people on an annual basis to obtain and maintain employment in the community to over 407 individuals working with 437 employers in our community. So again, when we started having these conversations one by one with individuals, this is how it resulted. It resulted in people wanting and choosing what they wanted and what that looked like for their life. Next slide. So some of the things that we started doing and looking, again, instead of providing a service, here's a pre-vocational service in our building, we started looking at how can we help create valuable connections in the community? How can, even as we are helping support people on that path to employment, as an example, and someone looking for a job, how can we help them experience things that match exactly what they're looking for and add in their life, so that they can move in that path to get a job in the community? Next slide. We also really took a different focus on how people want to spend their day. So this is a focus of Mark, and it was Mark's life last year. So Mark traditionally had attended some of our more traditional type day services. And Mark said, I want to make a difference in my community. I want to connect to what matters in my community. So last year, Mark held a fundraiser that he raised over $800 for the 9/11 memorial, and then was able to go on 9/11 and present his check to that agency in regards to their memorial. He heard there was a need, and the Humane Society and Food Shelter, Food Pantry needed some supports. And so he organized. And so again, instead of this traditional support of this is the activity we're providing, we listened to Mark and heard what mattered to Mark and helped Mark create an opportunity to move forward those passions that he has in his life. As you can see, also worked with 20 other different organizations in the community, where giving that ability for people to really experience what matters to me, and then how do I actually incorporate that into my life. Next slide. So we also helped and started supporting individuals to live independently in their own apartments, helping people find their own apartments, helping people utilize technology. So how could technology actually help you be able to have more rights of privacy and rights of freedom within your apartments, and be able to touch base with people when it matters and you need that support, but also have that privacy and someone not looking over your shoulder at all times. So this young gentleman, we helped him move out of a more traditional group home and into his own apartment. You know, he needs support at the times of medications. It's been a very important thing for his life, for him to stay successful. And he now has technology set up where he can just FaceTime someone and he initiates it, right? So we all initiate FaceTime in our life. I FaceTime my college kids all the time. And if they're in a position that they don't want to answer, they just don't. But otherwise they answer, and we have conversations all the time. So giving individuals that opportunity, and how that then resulted in owning my own front door, owning my own apartment, not living with other individuals that maybe I didn't choose, having my own food anytime I want it, and accessible, and really having the privacy I want in my life. Next slide. So I'm going to transition it to Carla, and I'm going to have Carla take the next 3 slides and talk just a little bit about what were some of the other creative things that we did that really helped individuals start to think about, how can my voice be heard, and how can I start to experience things and know what I want my person-centered plan to look like? What do I want in my life? And how can we transition from, instead of providing services, to really matching up and providing opportunities for individuals to experience what's important in their life?
Hello, everyone. My name is Carla. I am a 60, I don't like to admit that, 60-year-old white female with gray hair. So everything that we are focusing on is really about education, exposure, and experience. That way people know what options are out there. It helps facilitate conversations about what they might want. So to be able to just go out in the community and do different things helps people to be able to choose what they want their life to look like. So we have this wonderful Exploring the Arts grant where we are connecting with community members that are coming in, and we are also going out to various places in the community where they're sharing their time and talents, teaching about different art forms. And we're including all the arts, you know, martial arts, painting, just anything that is out there that people want to share, and giving the opportunity for individuals to experience it. One of the interesting things that we were able to do is, just by accident, I happened to be at an individual's home for a different purpose, and Sarah was just sitting there painting these wooden eggs. It is something she likes to do. And as we're thinking about this arts and employment, and Sarah did share that she sometimes will sell these eggs. And so I'm thinking, well, why can't Sarah teach her peers what she does and how she does it, and then also connect with employment? She was just getting started with DVR to see if this is something that she wanted to start a business around. So Sarah is exploring all this right now, and to be able to decide what she wants her life to look like. Individuals that never had the opportunity to dance or act or even play an instrument are getting the opportunity to do just that. And like I said, it can lead to any type of self-employment. We had a demonstration of someone showing us how to use a laser engraver. And once again, this could lead to somebody who might have an interest in that to say, hey, that's something I might want to try out and see what can I create that I can sell to other people. Next slide, please. So another awesome thing that we were able to partnership with our local technical college in Mid-State to do a career awareness series. We've done 2 series with them already. It's 6 classes, once in the fall, and we just finished our spring one. So it just gives adults of all abilities to be able to have an authentic, inclusive college experience. Just different classes on math and global education, health and wellness, just another thing to just expose people to what's out there for them to see, maybe this is something I want to explore further. Next slide, please. Our biggest thing is just really encouraging that self-advocacy. We have hired a self-advocate, and she is available. She teaches classes on friendships. She's able to do rights education. We've had her talk to our employers about what it is to have a person with a disability working at your organization, you know, talking to job coaches about what type of support, you know, so that you're not over supporting someone. We do a safe and free class about safety in the community, a lot of peer-to-peer learning where the staff steps back and says, you guys learn from each other. We have a member advisory board where the individuals are, you know, talking about what they're looking for from ODC, you know, what they expect from us, what they want us to do more for. We've assisted people to be able to attend Disability Advocacy Day in Odessa. We'll be able to talk to you a little bit about that, where she could speak to the legislatures. We support people to go to the Self-Determination Conference. The Employment First Conference is coming up in May, so we'll be supporting people there. There is an upcoming virtual conversation on cultivating inclusive and safe communities. We've got self-advocates signed up to take a part in that. Next slide, please. There's our wonderful day down in Madison, very exciting. So next slide. And then one of the things that helped us to be able to really hone in on this person-centered planning is CQL, the Council on Quality Leadership, has what's called personal outcome measure interviews. So they're looking at 21 indicators within a person's life to find out what type of supports they need, what more they're looking for. It really allows us to dig a little bit deeper into a person's life. One of the things that we've really needed to focus on was rights education, not only for our staff, but for individuals, so that they know what their rights are and they can choose what they want to exercise. And if they're not able to, what or who is limiting that for them. And the other thing we found was around relationships and friendships. A lot of people shared with us that, yes, they have friends, but they were just naming their friends who were staff or paid individuals. We're taking that role on of a friendship for them. So we were trying to increase those opportunities for individuals to really develop and increase those reciprocal friendships. We have a program called Better Together, in which we work with community volunteers and pair them up with an individual. They both have to have the same type of interest. Maybe somebody just wants to go out for dinner every Friday night. So we find a volunteer that has that same interest and let them make that connection and that friendship. And then we are also providing transportation to individuals so that they can participate in community events after what are typical service hours. So we don't support them in these events. All we do is get them there and make sure they get back home, because we know transportation is a barrier for a lot of individuals. And we also offer a healthy relationship class so that individuals can learn about what are healthy relationships, what should you be looking for in people. Next slide. And this is a poster that we've created and we have throughout our building. I'm just reminding people that they have these rights, and so they can come up in conversations and we can talk about, what do you want your supports to look like? Where do you need help? How can we help you to advocate for what you want out of life? Next slide.
Great.
Back to Julie.
So I just wanted to share really quick, here were some of the transformation strategies that as an organization we implemented. And as you can see, there are many things on this slide as we transition to Odessa, and she talks just a little bit about her story. And Odessa went through our POMS interview, and that's, I think, really when some of her aha moments came up in her life, where she then had an opportunity to say to us, boy, this is important in my life, and I want this in my life, and help me think about how I can have that in my life. The one that I really, really want to highlight, and I highlighted it actually on the slide, is that it's one person at a time. I think so many times when we think about, there is a lot of other components, right? Carla talked about training people on what rights are, not even realizing that you're not respecting and allowing rights to happen for people in their lives, not even realizing what that looks like. So there's a lot of other key components, but the biggest component is one person at a time. It's creating a structure and opportunity for someone to recognize they want something in their life, for them to be able to explore it, and then for you to help them be able to take those steps to actually make it happen in their life. So on the next slide, this is Odessa. And Odessa is going to talk to you about the tagline we love that she says, which is, why not me? And so on the next slide, I'm going to put Odessa on the screen, and she's going to talk a little bit about her experience.
Hello, welcome everyone. First off, I'm Odessa, and I'm 32 years old, and I'm a production worker from Wisconsin Rapids, ODC, and I've been there for 12 years, going on 13 in September for this year. And a lot of times I like to think about, like, when I think about why not me, because, a few years back last year, I was represented to go on this interview with going on a conference trip. Mm-hmm. And then first of all, I was like, wow, I get to go. Anyways, well, like a few years back a few years ago, like I was started out like as like any other, like I was quiet, shy, and then over the years I've learned throughout ODC that, you know, when I realized about someone who has a voice, that they should use it. And mostly because I also learned a lot by like, you know, especially from things that I didn't always have thought growing up, or and now it's like whether it's a cell phone that I didn't have, or a membership to something like the Y. So it's like there's like I want all it took was because because I was whether I'm in a choir. So it's like years have gone that this and so talked about like was wanting a smartphone like many years back when I first started getting a phone, like was mostly because like a few years back when I had my first experience with the snow, and then of course then there was that talk about because I mostly got a phone just because it was something for me to use in case if I needed help, but not then over the years when I wanted to start having more of a phone that I could be like everybody else. So it's like, so it's mostly based on like, why can't I have a phone like that? Especially during the times when I've had many trips to the library all the time. And of course I'm okay to use theirs, but theirs was always not always up to date, and you always had so many limited times. So it's like, and of course then around the same times like when COVID hit, it's like you cannot go anywhere. So and so a lot of, I believe again a lot of what my needs and wants is it comes at a certain pace, like and just like last month I went to on my first trip to Madison. Well, it's not like it was my first trip, but I've been there multiple times. But this was actually my first experience in a long time of getting to see an actual senator. And for that trip was a very interesting experience where I got to hear about, it's not just learning, but I also observed about what's like to hearing about everyone else's conversations from what they talked about, whether it's based on whether it was transportation stuff, and so it's very interesting for me.
I just want to bring up one point. When you say that a person-centered plan should always be changing and responding to the person. And Odessa, I just want to share, as we were riding up here today, you had just mentioned that you were having a conversation with your guardian.
Yes.
And then you want to share about what some of your thoughts are that you shared with
Well,
me.
some of the thoughts was because when her and I had the conversation, it was mostly about, because I'm sure we had a bunch of times, but mostly it was about because like, what would happen if this guardian that I have was either sick or something happened to her, or like what would happen, like who would be my backup, And so a lot of times you talked about was like like why don't we have something that would help me, not just to kind of help me prepare more, so just in case if something did happen, that I'll always have this backup so that I'm.
But yeah, you were also thinking that, you know, will I eventually not have to have a guardian? And
That's the other thing too, because I've thought about like, because because at some point down the road, because I've coming along the way, because I've had a lot of people come and go, and it's like the same thing like when the inclusive people that have been helping me out, but it's like, at some point in time there, I feel like, do I really need, I mean, they're great people and they've been really helpful for me and over the years and getting things that I really need, because like a few years ago was when I was moving from one apartment to the next, or whether it was doing my own shopping for once, because I used to have someone who used to take me all the time, but then I started doing that more on my own, because it's like, why do I really, I mean, I was good at the start, but then it's like when there's a lot of times when this person will always be late, or then it's like there were times where I ended up going shopping for myself, and it's like it felt like good, because so it's like, do I really need to have someone to take me when I have wheels for myself?
so yeah, and just exploring those other options for you, you know, if you want to start paying your own bills, things like that, and looking at supported decision making instead of guardianship. So a lot of opportunities that you have, you know, to discuss and look into.
And the same thing I think about, like, I mean, this century, to me, this century seems a lot more different than compared to like where I know that there is help.
Right.
So it's like, and of course we have to find that help.
Well, yeah, and just deciding what it is you want your
just-
life to look like.
Well, thank you, Odessa. And thanks for listening to our story at ODC. And very exciting around, as you can see, our transition from being an organization that really focused on services and really transitioned to a person-centered approach, where we hear what all individuals, just like Odessa shared, this is my dreams, this is my hopes. And instead of creating services, really thinking about what can we help build around Odessa and every single individual, one person at a time, to help them move forward their life. So now I'm going to transition it back to Jonathan for the group discussion time.
Oh, wow. Thank you so much. All three of you, Julie, Carla, Odessa, that was great. And as you've heard from them, this new rule is really worth celebrating, because it helps communicate to all of us the rights that we have to create our own community on our own terms. Excellent. Autism Society of America and the National Association of Councils on Developmental Disabilities has created a tool, which is on your screen now, listing your rights under HCBS. So let's get a look at this. You have rights. So let's start with that first one. You have the right to privacy, dignity, and respect. Just as an example, do you want to lock on your door so you can have privacy? Or do you even have privacy or alone time where you live? You have the freedom from coercion and restraint. Does your provider listen to you when you decide where you want to go, or do they take you where they want to go? Are you confined to your room, or are there other places where you just don't want to be? You've got the right to control your personal resources. Odessa did a great example of that with just having a phone. Are you allowed to spend your money on the things that you want, or are you not allowed to go to certain stores or buy certain things? It's your resources. You've got the right to access food and visitors at any time. Do you set your own meal schedule, or does your provider only let you eat at certain times? And finally, you have the right to physical accessibility. If you live in a provider group home and you use a wheelchair, are all areas of that home, and that's the kitchen, the restroom, the common areas, are they accessible to you? Those are all your rights that you have. So as we look at this, we've got a good sized group. So what I'd like to do is just ask a few questions and we'll go through. I'd ask you really to use the Q&A. I can't see every single person in this particular view, so if you raised your hand, I might not see you. So if you could put your questions in the Q&A, that would be fantastic. And as we go through here, when I call on you, if you could just identify yourself by name and let us know, are you an advocate? Are you a parent? Or are you a provider? And Eric is letting me know that we actually can enable people to talk if you're comfortable talking. So who'd like to go first? Does anybody have any other great examples or stories about their residence or workplace where some of the rights covered under HCBS are not enforced?
One moment, I'm going through the list to allow people to actually speak up if they so desire to.
Thank you, Eric.
The floor is now yours, should you so desire to make use of it.
Thank you, Eric. And what I really would love to hear is who else has got some great examples of stories about their residence or workplace where the rules are not enforced. Or if you have questions for the panelists, that's okay too.
We have a hand raised from Ray.
Okay.
Go right ahead.
Yeah, I live a self-determined life. So I'm also a peer mentor and I work at Community Living Services. So, yeah, I just want to share that, you know, you can live a life. So.
Thank you, Ray. You want to talk a little bit more about your life, Ray? Where you live, what you do?
Yeah, so what I do is I live in the community, very involvement in the community, always out in the community, giving hope and helping others. Go to city councils. I'm a chairperson of the Disability Advocacy community out there group. So got like a 7-member board and different people sit on our board. Some have different abilities. Some have, there's some people that sit on our boards that were like with mental health and different where they can share. And we also partner with the police department and the fire department. And I do have 2 roommates here and I do sign a lease and I love it. I love my community. And I like to see other people live that life and have that choice. So.
Thank you for sharing that. You said that you were chair of your local board. Getting into a position of leadership isn't something as simple as showing up and saying, hey, it's my turn to be in charge. Can you talk to us how about you worked your way into that very public leadership position?
Well, how I could talk about it is, for example, I've been going to city councils for a while at first. Then I talked to one of our mayors at the time. 2000, I believe, was 2007. Wow. So I worked out where I started a board, a 5-member board. And we've been out, you know, from the beginning, it was not easy. I have to keep going out there and talking to our members and say, hey, now I got people talking. They weren't talking to us as much, but now people are talking to me and talking to our members. So, and it took work, you know, didn't happen overnight. So, yeah.
Good things rarely do. Thank you for that.
You're welcome.
As a group, and again, feel free to ask questions to the panelists if you'd like, but when you look at this person-centered planning checklist, when you look at this, do you think that there might be one rule that would be hard to advocate to your provider for? Let me flip this to the providers out there. When providers, and you look at this list, where have you seen the most advocacy from the clients you serve?
We have a hand up from Brett.
Brett, please.
Hi, good afternoon, Johnson. I appreciate the opportunity. I can't speak for all, but one of the areas that I have seen that people are really working towards is physical accessibility for their own settings. There's as people know across the nation, there is a very short supply of physically accessible homes. And I see that as a lot of the advocacy work that has come across my desk.
Great. Thank you for sharing that, Brett. Who else has any thoughts on the checklist?
Also, I believe that transportation is one of the huge issues that prevent a lot of people from being able to access more independence due to sometimes where they live at, and it's not a lot of accessibility or any investment in the community for people with disabilities to be able to work and live on their own. So that's, but also knowing that the information is out there as well, because a lot of people really don't know, their rights or the resources that is able for people to attain those resources to be able to live an independent life.
Thank you for sharing that. How do you think somebody facing these obstacles to community living could make a plan to overcome them? And again, this is open to everybody.
I think by sitting down with that guardian and wanting to do it, but also the guardian or the person to take care of has to have an understanding that, something may happen to you and you need to have something in place to be able for him to live an independent life so you don't have to worry. But it does come like the person says, it's not going to happen overnight. It's kind of like you got to have an uncomfortable conversation in order for you to get what you want. And everybody, parents may not don't like that, but they have to understand that we all have to grow in some aspect of life.
I'm going to have one follow-up question, and then I'm going to go ahead and get to Allison. You brought up an uncomfortable conversation. Are you comfortable sharing what one of those uncomfortable conversations to advocate for yourself sounded like?
I think one of them is trying to drive. Driving was one of those conversations that any parent don't want to hear, especially with a disability. Not anyone, but it's sort of like saying you gotta okay, let me try it to really see can I do it. And then if I know but what I'm saying is don't define me what I can't do. Let me try it first to say that I can do it. Then that I can't do it first. Don't say it for me. Let me do it. So that was one of those conversations. Because sometimes a parent would be like, "No, you can't do this," and then when you did it, now you're not prepared for the next step. You know what I mean? So
I do. Thank you for sharing that. Allison, you had your hand up.
I just wanted to speak a little to some of the questions that you were asking in terms of what on the checklist was could be a possible issue, and in terms of setting. So I work for the Governor's Council for People with Disabilities in Indiana, but I'm also a dually diagnosed individual, and I have experienced some difficulties in the workplace as well as with service providers. And it's interesting how it's when I bring an advocate or somebody with me into an environment, how people can talk to me or the person that I'm with in a way that I would be treated like an adult, but when I'm by myself, I'm talked to as if I'm a child. And I'm sure other people have experienced this where it's like almost like infantilizing. And I think that that's just a matter of dignity and respect. And I don't think it comes from a place of, you know, where people are purposefully doing it, but I do think that that's something that is slowly changing. But that is a huge issue. And when people are looking for autonomy, or the ability to do things on their own, and especially in a setting where there's a group home, or, you know, they're working towards more independence, it really is difficult to move towards that when you're looked at as somebody who can't because you are less than. And, you know, there's been times where I have wanted to do things and been told that I can't because of my disability. So I think that that is a major hurdle right now in the community, disability community, in the autism community. I'm part of the autism community as well as in the traumatic brain injury community. It really is like something that I deal with. So that is, yeah, I just wanted to speak to that.
I'm glad that you did. That's literally the first item on this checklist, the right to privacy, dignity, and respect. And so often, I'm glad you brought up that around infantilizing. That's entirely too many times somebody's first reaction to a person with disability, where you're infantilized and almost encouraged like you're a child for just something as basic as something that a person without a disability, it would be nothing. You wouldn't even say anything. So I'm glad you brought that up. Thank you. Barb, looks like you had your hand up.
Yes, I like to piggyback on what she just said. My problem is that I have a speech difficulty. I have cerebral palsy, and when people meet me, they don't think I'm very smart. So that's why I engage. So I like right now I like to go out and meet new people. I've talked to you and like for example, I like to join a book club. I love to read, but when people see me, they don't think I'm smart. They don't want me in the club. And another barrier is medical people, especially when you go in a hospital. Boy, they have problems that need to be addressed like now. They treat people with disabilities bad. They make, like, when I got my knee replaced last December, they were making decisions and not even consulting me because they thought, she's not smart enough to talk to. So the truth is, I went to college. I have a master's degree. So really the joke is on them. but that doesn't help me. That's all I have to say. Thanks, Jonathan.
Thank you, Barb. I appreciate that. Yeah, and so many of this, it's this first fundamental right, the right to privacy, dignity, and respect, is something that has to be advocated for day in and day out. Allison, you still had your hand up. Did you have another question? No, I'm just making sure. We have plenty of time. Very good. Any other points on the checklist that we'd like to explore while we're on this call? Any hypotheticals or any opportunity to maybe talk about challenges you yourself are having and put it out to this group and say, hey, you know what, I've struggled with getting my provider to take me out to buy an iPhone. How did that go? Things like that. Well, then, if not, we're about done for the day. So unless anybody has any other commentary, any other questions, I want to thank all of our panelists for being here today, and all of you that participated in the discussion today. It made it that much better. We hope you find this new checklist helpful to you as you work with your provider to create your own community, starting with your own residents or where you receive HCBS services. In addition to the checklist, there's several other resources from our coalition partners that might be helpful to you. We've listed those resources on this slide, and we'll share them with people who registered for this webinar in a follow-up email. Thank you all for joining us today, and that concludes our workshop. Have a great day.